Good morning. I've called this news conference in the spirit of transparency and as a request for information. I'll be discussing a former BPD officer who has cast a dark shadow on our law enforcement profession. When our officers first put on the badge, they take an oath to conduct themselves with the highest moral integrity and to build and ensure public trust. Unfortunately, we discovered an employee who has since resigned who betrayed the trust of this department and the citizens of Bradenton, and who failed to uphold the standards which I strictly enforce. In June of last year, a citizen complaint was filed against Sergeant Lionel Marinez by an adult female and her parents. They had concerns over the actions of Marinez after he had a chance brief encounter with her in the parking lot of a local establishment. While driving home, she became concerned upon realizing he was following her in his police cruiser, although he turned off shortly before her arrival to her parents' house. A short time later, Marinez showed up to this residence and told her parents who answered the door that he was there to speak with the woman who had arrived there shortly before regarding a domestic matter. Parents, of course, recognized there was no domestic situation occurring with their daughter, questioned his true intentions, and refused to allow their daughter to come to the door. Marinez continued to persuade the parents to let him speak with their daughter. However, they refused and requested his name and supervisor information. Marinez left the residence without providing any of this. They immediately called our agency and spoke with the watch commander on duty, who was able to determine that it was Lionel Marinez, who was working at the time, and who, upon questioning, told him a starkly different account, saying he followed her to her residence because one of her headlights was out and he thought maybe she was impaired. The two stories really didn't match up, and when it was brought to my attention, I ordered a further investigation into the incident, which ultimately led to an audit of Marinez's driver's license and vehicle registration records use, as well as his patrol activity. The results of this audit heightened my concern even greater due to discrepancies of the subjects he was conducting queries on versus his involvement he and the department were working on with regards to open and active cases as well. A very, very clear trend of focusing on female versus male names emerged. At the beginning of the investigation, Marinez, a 12-year employee with our agency and serving in a supervisory capacity, was pulled from patrol activities and assigned to desk duty. As the investigation continued and the egregious nature of his actions became more and more apparent, he was ultimately placed on administrative leave without pay and stripped of his badge, gun, and uniforms. On October 30th, 2018, Marinez resigned. Our investigation, however, continued and revealed several hundred questionable database queries of women during a specific time frame that was chosen due to our ability to correlate this data through various internal systems. It also revealed that this behavior may have been going on for years, stretching as far back as 2012. Ultimately, we were able to locate and interview nearly 150 women in association with this case. From there, a smaller subset was identified in which we were clearly able to show that Marinez engaged in negative and inappropriate direct contact with them while presenting himself as a Bradenton police officer, both on and off duty. To get right to the root of the matter, Lionel Marinez was not utilizing this data for law enforcement purposes whatsoever. Instead, he was using it in a variety of ways, via social media, cold telephone calls, visits to their home under the guise of being there for police business, you name it, to try and get dates with these women. And he was very persistent and successful at times in his efforts to do so. Of course, it goes without saying that this is not what our officers should be doing with their access to information or with their time. I will add that a majority of this smaller subset were Hispanic women. Let me be clear how important it was to me, to this agency, that this administrative case was handled appropriately and no stone left unturned. At one point, 5 investigators were involved, working full-time, resulting in thousands of hours to mine data and to locate and interview involved subjects. Our internal investigation was recently closed with the finding of numerous administrative violations involving gross misconduct, to include misuse of criminal justice information, violations of our record security policy, and sex on duty. Had Marinas not resigned, he would have been fired, and that finding has been provided to FDLE relative to his law enforcement certification. I'd also like to add that an enhancement of our database auditing practices has already occurred within the agency. While BPD's administrative case has concluded, this remains a very active and open criminal investigation which is being handled by the FBI. For that reason, while I appreciate the desire for the public to know more, BPD's administrative case material will not be released at this time, as the FBI has indicated that doing so could compromise their ongoing investigation. I've tried to paint a clear picture for you today in light of this, so that you respect our need to retain the confidentiality of this information and this investigation. My primary goal in appearing before you this morning is to foremost ensure that the public is aware that Lionel Marinas is no longer serving in the capacity of a sworn police officer with the Bradenton Police Department, and secondly, to assist the FBI with their investigation by providing you with a picture of him and encouraging anyone who may have further information to contact the FBI Tampa office at 813-253-1000. This is truly a disturbing situation for me as chief. Over the past couple weeks, I have personally met with most of the women involved in the smaller subset in an effort to help them regain their trust in the Bradenton Police Department and to ensure them that Marinas' actions are not a representation of those who so proudly wear this uniform and badge, and also simply to tell them, I'm sorry. So with that, I will again encourage anyone who might have additional information to come forward and open it up to any questions, but also reminding you that there is little more that I can comment on, as I do not want to risk compromising the FBI's investigation.
What sort of potential federal charges is Marinas facing?
I can't answer that question on behalf of the FBI.
When you say he betrayed your trust, the trust in this department and the community, elaborate on that.
We all know why police officers pin on this badge and go out every day in this uniform. It's to service the community, to provide safety, security. He was doing far from that. As far as I'm concerned, he betrayed the oath in which he swore to, and really made us all look bad. That's not what you're supposed to be doing out there 24/7. You're supposed to be upholding the oath that you swore to.
How was he picking these women? Was he randomly picking women that he met while on calls and then inputting them into the database to then target them? Or how did he go about initially picking his potential victims?
All I can tell you is that he was very creative in his manner, and it wasn't regulated to one specific source in which he obtained his data.
Did the women share with you their reaction when he reached out to them? And you alluded that maybe in some cases he was successful in going out on dates with them?
That is what I alluded to, yes.
And can you share with some of their reaction to you that they shared with you about he reaching out to them? Were they surprised? What could you share?
Again, I am going to tell you that this investigation involved the interview of nearly 150 women that we were able to locate. And obviously, the statements varied considerably. The smaller group that I met with individually, I felt understood why I was there. They appreciated my efforts at assuring them that Bradenton police officers aren't out there knocking on their doors, making phone calls, trying to meet them on social media to date them, right? That's not why we're here. We're here to do the job we're.
Now, you say this appears to have been going on for years. Were there ever any other complaints that for some reason one and one weren't put together in the past, or?
Yes, there was, back in 2012.
These women that you met with, were they, I mean, what did they tell you? What did they say? I mean, were they shocked? What did they say?
Again, I don't want to go into further detail.
You don't have to tell us their name.
I certainly don't want to compromise their investigation, because what we want to avoid doing is getting into, I just don't want to answer that question.
Was he married?
I don't want to discuss his personal status.
And just to be clear, even though he's resigned, if he still faces charges for this?
I don't know that the FBI has any concern over our administrative investigation insofar as whether he's fired or still employed here. They're independent with the criminal investigation.
Now, I know you said you met with a lot of these women and tried to rebuild the trust with them. Obviously, there's a lot more women in the Bradenton community. You know, how do you work on rebuilding trust with the community at large?
By holding a press conference like I am today and letting everybody know that we don't stand for this. And if a situation similar to this is ever discovered, you can be assured that I'll do exactly what I did with this one. Over 5 investigators working thousands of hours, full-time, ensuring that no stone is left unturned to get to the truth of the matter.
Is there any reason to believe any other officers were involved in this activity over the years?
No, ma'am.
Can you tell us more about the 2012 investigation?
No, ma'am.
How important is it now that if there's other women that know that they were a victim but didn't come forward now?
I think any women who might have information that could help the FBI in their investigation should certainly come forward. I think that anybody who has any information should feel that this is something that isn't relegated to one person here, one person there, that we should look at this as a community issue and certainly come together and encourage folks who, even if they think that it's not really something that could add much, to make that phone call. Let the FBI make that decision whether it could help. And I will tell you that is the message that I got. Show the picture and encourage people to come forward.
Chief Bevan, looking at this, why would the FBI be investigating, and what kind of charges could he possibly be facing?
At this point, the charges, I won't say that. At this point, the criminal violations that are being investigated are those most appropriate to be investigated by a federal entity, which would of course be the FBI.
So did he go out of state by chance to track down some of these women?
No.
And the fact that he resigned means he can still be a cop today. He can go fly anywhere in the state.
While his FDLE certification is still active, we immediately sent the appropriate paperwork to alert them of the fact that Lionel Marinas resigned while under active investigation. And before any other agency would consider hiring him, they would reach out to this entity. They would immediately know what his status is. So, no.
Is the FBI considering that he could be a suspect in a crime, unsolved crime somewhere, locally or in the state?
I can't comment on what they might.
Were there ever cases where you tried to strike a deal with these women, like Performance Act, and I'll get you out of this ticket, that sort of thing?
I don't I don't have any further information with regards to what their investigation is, other than to tell you that the criminal charges, the criminal portion of this seemed most appropriate for the FBI, as opposed to any state agency or even a local agency. As you know, we're able to investigate any criminal behavior on the part of our officers if it falls under the jurisdiction of Florida state statutes. Currently, as the case presented itself, or at least our administrative case, we didn't find that and felt it was best to remand it to the appropriate federal agency.
You know, this is something where he did this over 150 times, and you said there may have been about 2 instances where people actually complained about this. You know, what does that say about the public's willingness to come forward to the police department when it is an officer that might be committing a criminal action, especially in the minority community, because you did mention the majority of these women were Hispanic?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you the first family that the case investigator and I went to visit, I sat down with her and her parents and I told them they were heroes as far as I was concerned. Because in this day and age, I think it takes a little bit of courage to be willing to tell a police officer standing at the door, even when you know it makes no sense, no, we don't want to let you talk to our daughter because we don't get the right feeling about this, and we don't want to do that until we've spoken to your supervisor. And what I would tell you is, any community member, if they see a behavior or have an interaction with any police officer with the city of Bradenton that they feel is inappropriate or just doesn't seem in conjunction with what we're here for, make that phone call. Call us. We can't, as administrators, be everywhere. We have to rely on the folks we put out on the street to do the right thing. And 99% of the time they do. Often, or once in a rare while, somebody slips through the cracks. And if not for this one person making this complaint, it might still be going on. And so I did. I let them know how much I appreciated what they had done. I realize that it puts the Bradenton Police Department in a bad light, but it's worth it to know that I took somebody who shouldn't be on the street anymore off of it.
Were there any other commonalities among the victims other than being younger Hispanic women? Did they all live in certain neighborhoods, perhaps that he patrolled?
Not necessarily, no.
And how have we changed, what have we done to change the way you guys do checks and?
As I mentioned, we have enhanced our auditing practices. However, I will tell you, police officers have a great deal of opportunity to access a lot of various databases, and we do a very good job through normal auditing practices to try to catch outliers, things that don't seem to look right. But it can be very difficult unless something happens that we can put all that together to say this just isn't right. This behavior, he was subject to audits, just not perhaps the right kind. We've fixed that.
And then, so you just changed the parameters, what did you do?
A few things, changed the parameters, expanded what we had been looking at in the past, a variation of things.
Was it just David, or were there other databases he was using?
I will tell you, it wasn't David.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't David. So
Is he still in the area?
I can't answer that question.
Would you say, was he stalking these women?
The appropriate entity to investigate the criminal nature of this was the FBI. Understand that some of the ideas people might have about potential charges would fall under Florida state statutes, that one being one of them. We didn't find that.
So is this something where it's more based on the databases he was accessing we're looking into?
Again, I want to leave that to the FBI because I'm not sure that they've completely wrapped their arms around the entire case at this point.
Did this go as far as any sort of sexual battery that you know of?
There are no state statutes at this point that violations that we're investigating.
So to be clear, were these women that he happened to just meet and he used the database to do a search on them? Or were these women that were part of cases that?
It was vast. These names came from a multitude of different outlets.
How successful was he to date some of these girls, 150?
It was a smaller subset.
Can you give us a number?
I don't want to do that because I'm not sure at this juncture we have a full picture yet.
And one more thing, to reassure the public that this would not happen again, hopefully, that no officer would misuse the resources at their hands, what changes have the department made to make sure this doesn't happen?
Again, we have enhanced our auditing practices. We've not only expanded the number, but we have looked much deeper into some of the databases that normally wouldn't have been subject to us even being mindful of. Is that it? All right, thank you, everybody.